Who was the world's first artist? It's a simple question, but the answer isn't simple at all. It's not a name. It's not one person who picked up a piece of charcoal and decided to draw a mammoth. The first artist wasn't a who, it was a when, it was a what, it was a slow dawn of an idea in a mind that was becoming, for the first time, human. To find the first artist, you have to dig, you have to go back, way back, further back than history, further back than writing. You have to go back into the deep, messy, and fascinating story of our own evolution. And you have to decide what you mean by art. If art is a beautiful, realistic painting on a cave wall, then the first artists were our species, Homo sapiens, tens of thousands of years ago in places like France and Spain. But that feels too easy. It's like starting a story at the last chapter. What about the chapters before? What if art is something more basic? What if it's just the first time one of our ancestors made a mark that wasn't an accident? The first time they made something that meant something, even if the meaning is lost to us now. If that's our definition, the story gets a lot older, and the cast of characters gets bigger. Let's start at what feels like the beginning, but is really already deep into the story. Let's start with a tool. For over 1,000,000 years, one of our ancestors, Homo erectus, made a tool called the Acheulean hand axe. You've probably seen pictures of them. They are teardrop-shaped stones, chipped carefully to have a point at one end and a rounded base at the other. They were the Swiss Army knife of the Paleolithic. You could butcher an animal, dig for roots, or cut wood. They were incredibly useful. But here's the strange thing. Archaeologists find them in the thousands, and many of them are just too perfect. They are more symmetrical than they need to be for the job. Some are made from stone with beautiful fossils embedded in them, or with striking bands of color. The maker clearly chose that specific rock for a reason beyond its sharpness. Some hand axes are gigantic, far too big and heavy for a human hand to use effectively. And some show almost no signs of wear. They were made, and then maybe just held or looked at and then left behind. Why would you spend so much time and effort making a perfect, beautiful tool that you weren't even going to use? What was going on in the mind of that Homo erectus 1,000,000 years ago? They were imposing a form, a preconceived idea of symmetry and beauty onto a raw piece of flint. They were making something that pleased their eye and their hand. This wasn't just about function. It was about form. Is that art? Maybe not, but it's a vital first step. It's the birth of an aesthetic sense. It's the moment our ancestors started to see the world, not just as a collection of things to use, food, threats, shelter, but as a place of shapes and patterns and satisfying forms. They were appreciating beauty. They were creating it. This wasn't symbolic art. The hand axe didn't stand for anything else. It was just a beautiful hand axe. But the impulse to make it beautiful, to make it more than it needed to be, that's the seed. That's the root of the artistic urge. And there are other, even more tantalizing hints from this deep past. In a site in Morocco, researchers found a piece of quartzite, maybe 400,000 years old, that looks vaguely like a human figure. It's called the Tauntaun figurine. It has some grooves on it that seem to have been intentionally deepened, maybe to make the neck and legs more obvious. Another similar object, the Barakat ram figurine from Israel, is at least 230,000 years old. These objects are hugely controversial. Are they just rocks that happen to look like people, a trick of nature? Or did an ancient hominin pick up a suggestive-looking stone and help it along a little, enhancing the resemblance? If they did, that's a massive cognitive leap. That's recognizing an image in something else, a face in the clouds, a figure in a rock. And then acting on it. It's the beginning of representation. It's saying, this thing can stand for that thing. But the strongest evidence for the first true mark making comes from an even older find. In Java, Indonesia, scientists found a freshwater mussel shell. Scratched onto its surface is a deliberate geometric zigzag pattern. It's clean, it's precise. The lines were clearly made by a sharp tool, all in one session, by a single individual. The shell was dated to be around 500,000 years old. The artist was a Homo erectus. What does a zigzag mean? We have no idea. It could be a doodle, it could be a mark of ownership. It could be a map or a symbol. We will never know. But what we do know is that it is not an accident. It is an abstract design. 500,000 years ago, someone sat and deliberately engraved a pattern onto a shell for a reason. This wasn't a picture of something. It was a pure pattern. That is thinking symbolically. That, by any reasonable definition, is a kind of art. It's the earliest known drawing in the world. So maybe the first artist was a Homo erectus sitting by a river in Java, scratching on a shell. Um, but the story doesn't stop there. Another character enters the stage. They are our closest extinct relatives, and for a long time we thought of them as simple, brutish cavemen. We were wrong! They were the Neanderthals. Neanderthals lived in Europe and Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. They had brains as large as ours or even larger. They were expert hunters, made sophisticated tools, cared for their sick and elderly, and buried their dead. For decades, the consensus was that they had no art, no symbolism, no culture in the way we think of it. That was supposed to be the thing that made us Homo sapiens special. But piece by piece, evidence has emerged that has completely shattered that idea. Neanderthals like to accessorize. At sites in Croatia, they found eagle talons, a full set of 8, that had been cut, notched, and polished. They were likely worn as a necklace or a bracelet around 130,000 years ago. Think about what that means. An eagle is a powerful, impressive predator. Wearing its talons isn't just decoration. It's a statement. It's about power, about identity. It's a symbol. In Spain, archaeologists found seashells, some with natural holes, some with holes punched in them, that were coated with pigments, red and yellow ochre. These shells were brought from miles away, painted, and worn as jewelry 115,000 years ago. Neanderthals were using pigments, especially red ochre, all the time. They were grinding it up, mixing it into a kind of paint. We used to think this was for practical purposes, like using it as an adhesive for tools or as a type of insect repellent. And it might have been used for those things, but we now have direct evidence that they were using it for something more. They were painting themselves, they were creating body art, they were using color to communicate something about themselves, their group, their status. That is a universal human behavior, and Neanderthals were doing it 100,000 years before modern humans showed up in Europe. But their most profound and mysterious artistic creation lies deep inside a cave in France called Bruniquel. You have to crawl and climb a long way into the darkness to find it. There, in a large chamber, someone, long ago, broke off hundreds of stalagmites from the cave floor. They carried them and arranged them into 2 large rings and several smaller piles. Then they built fires on top of them. The structure is massive, complex, and deliberate. And it is 176,000 years old. The only hominins in France at that time were Neanderthals. This wasn't a shelter, it's too deep in the cave, it wasn't a hunting blind. It serves no practical purpose that we can imagine. It must have been a ritual space. A place for gatherings, for ceremonies, for something important. The Neanderthals who built this were not just surviving. They were shaping their world, they were creating a kind of symbolic architecture in the belly of the earth. This is an act of incredible creativity and social organization. It's a work of art you can walk inside. For a long time, the one thing we thought Neanderthals didn't do was paint on cave walls. That was our thing. Then came the bombshell. In Spain, there are several caves with ancient paintings. In a cave called La Pasiega, there is a red ladder-like symbol. In Maltreviso, there are hand stencils made by placing a hand on the wall and blowing pigment over it. In Ardales, there are red painted stalactite curtains. For years, we assumed Homo sapiens made these. But new dating techniques allowed scientists to test the age of the thin calcite layers that formed over the paint. The results were staggering. The ladder shape was over 64,000 years old. The hand stencil was over 66,000 years old. The red marks in Ardales were over 65,000 years old. Homo sapiens did not arrive in Spain until about 40,000 years ago. The only people who could have made these paintings were Neanderthals. It was a stunning revelation. Neanderthals were cave painters. They went into the dark, just like us, and made marks on the walls. They made abstract symbols, and they left their handprints, a timeless signature that says, I was here. They were not copying the world around them, they were creating symbols, they were artists. There's no other word for it, so maybe a Neanderthal was the first artist. It's a powerful idea. It makes our family tree feel a little less lonely. It means the urge to create, to make symbolic marks on the world is not just a human trait. It's a hominin trait, something we shared with our cousins. And then we arrive on the scene. Our own species, Homo sapiens, we evolved in Africa around 300,000 years ago. And for a long time, our toolkits looked pretty similar to those of other hominins. But in Africa, we also start to see the first signs of the creative explosion that would later define our species. In Blombo's cave, on the coast of South Africa, archaeologists found pieces of red ochre dating back 75,000 to 100,000 years. This wasn't just raw pigment, these were crayons of ochre, ground down to a point and used to draw. On two of these pieces, someone had engraved a pattern. It was a set of crosshatched lines framed by parallel lines at the top and bottom. It's a deliberate, repeating design. In the same cave, they found tiny seashells, all of the same species, all with a single, deliberately punched hole in the same place. They were beads. A necklace. This is 100,000-year-old jewelry. It's evidence of a people who were thinking in symbols, decorating themselves, and sharing a common artistic tradition. At another South African site, Deep Kloof Rock Shelter, researchers found something amazing, a huge collection of ostrich eggshell fragments. Back then, ostrich eggs were used as canteens to carry water, but these fragments, dating back 60,000 years, were covered in engraved patterns. And the patterns weren't random. There were a few specific designs, like a hatched band motif, that were used over and over again. This wasn't just one person doodling, this was a shared culture. People knew the patterns. They had a meaning. They were communicating with each other through these abstract designs. This is art as a social glue, a way of building a group identity. Then, around 45,000 years ago, modern humans arrived in Europe. The Neanderthals were already there. For a few thousand years, the two species shared the continent. And then the Neanderthals vanished, and our species began to create art unlike anything the world had ever seen before. It's often called the creative explosion. Suddenly, art is everywhere. It's not just abstract patterns anymore. It's figurative, it's pictures of things, and it is breathtaking. Go to Chauvet Cave in France. The art there is 36,000 years old. It's the oldest known figurative art in Europe. And it's not primitive. It's a masterpiece. There are panels of lions drawn one on top of the other, giving a sense of a whole pride on the move. There are rhinos charging with their heads down. There are horses that look like they could gallop right off the wall. The artists used the natural bumps and curves of the cave wall to give their animals a three-dimensional quality. They used shading and perspective. This was not the work of beginners. This was a mature, confident art, sprung from a tradition that was probably already ancient. And then there's Lascaux, also in France, painted about 17,000 years ago. It's called the Sistine Chapel of Prehistory. It's a dizzying kaleidoscope of animals: bulls, horses, stags, bison. They are layered on top of each other, running, falling, living. The scale's huge. The famous Hall of the Bulls surrounds you with monumental figures. Standing in that cave, in the flickering light of a tallow lamp, it must have been an overwhelming, magical experience. And it wasn't just painting. They were sculptors, too. They carved small, portable statues from mammoth ivory, bone, and stone. The most famous are the Venus figurines, found all over Europe. They are statuettes of female figures, usually with exaggerated breasts, hips, and bellies, and with little attention paid to the face or feet. The Venus of Willendorf is the most well-known. They are not portraits. They are symbols. Symbols of fertility, of motherhood, of woman as an idea. Perhaps the most astonishing piece of Ice Age art is a small statue found in a German cave, Hohenstein-Stadel. It's carved from mammoth ivory and stands about a foot high. It dates back 40,000 years. It has the body of a human, but the head of a lion. It's called the Lion Man. I think about that for a second. The artists at Chauvet and Lascaux were painting the world they saw. They saw lions, horses, mammoths. But the artists who carved the Lion Man created something that did not exist in the real world. They took two ideas, human and lion, and combined them in their mind. They created a hybrid creature. A monster, a spirit, a god. This isn't just art. This is mythology. It's religion. It's proof of an imagination that could conjure up entire worlds that existed only in the mind. This is a level of symbolic and abstract thought that is profoundly modern. Why did they do it? Why did our ancestors, who lived hard lives in a cold and dangerous world, spend so much time and energy crawling into the deepest, most dangerous parts of caves to paint animals? Why did they carve these strange figures? We will never know for sure. The people who made them are gone, and they left no written explanation. But we can guess. Maybe it was hunting magic, maybe by painting a bison with a spear in its side, they believed they could gain power over the real bison, ensuring a successful hunt. Maybe the caves were sanctuaries, holy places where young people were initiated into the secrets of the tribe, with the animal paintings as a kind of visual textbook. Maybe it was shamanism. A shaman, a spiritual leader, would enter a trance state, perhaps aided by the darkness, the silence, and the lack of oxygen deep in the cave. The visions they saw in their trance spirits, animals, geometric patterns box, they would then paint on the walls. This would explain why so many paintings are in hard-to-reach places, and why they are often layered on top of each other. The act of painting was more important than the final image. Maybe it was just about telling stories. passing down the knowledge of the elders, the great myths of the tribe, the history of the world as they knew it. The caves were their first canvases, their first movie screens. The truth is probably a mix of all these things and more that we can't even imagine. But what is certain is that this art was not just decoration, it was important. It was central to their lives and their worldview. It was how they made sense of the world, how they connected with each other, and how they communed with the mysterious forces they believed governed their lives. So, let's go back to our question. Who was the world's first artist? There is no single answer. There is no one moment where art began. It was a long, slow evolution of a capacity. The first artist might have been a Homo erectus a million years ago, feeling a deep satisfaction in the perfect symmetry of a hand axe, making it beautiful just for the sake of it. The first artist might have been another Homo erectus half a million years ago, scratching a zigzag on a shell, creating the first abstract design just to see what it looked like. The first artist might have been a Neanderthal 176,000 years ago, deep inside a cave, placing a broken stalagmite just so, building a space that was not for living but for ritual. The first artist might have been another Neanderthal 66,000 years ago, standing in the dark, placing a hand against the cold stone of a Spanish cave wall, and blowing red pigment, leaving a ghostly print of their existence. And the first artists, as we commonly think of them, were our own ancestors, Homo sapiens, who carried this ancient urge with them out of Africa. They refined it, expanded it, and used it to populate darkness with the creatures of their world and the phantoms of their minds. They gave us lions that breathe and bison that bleed and men with the heads of lions. The first artist wasn't a person. It was an impulse. It was the moment a mind became self-aware enough to want to leave a mark. To say, I was here. To say, this is what I saw. To say, this is what I imagined. It was the birth of the symbol. The moment one thing could stand for another. That impulse is the thread that connects the hand that shaped the axe, the hand that scratched the shell, the hand that left the print on the cave wall, and the hand that holds a brush or a pencil today. It is one of the most fundamental things that makes us human, and it is a legacy we share with ancestors and cousins who have been gone for a very, very long time. The first artist is anonymous, but their work is all around us. It's in every painting, every sculpture, every story, every song. It's an echo of that first spark in a long extinct mind.